The throne room of the Catharan Empire fell silent as Emperor Zul'Varin raised all four of his arms in the formal gesture of absolute pronouncement. By the ancient laws of conquest and the divine right of the Catharan bloodline, I hereby declare war upon the Terran Confederation. Your species has existed in our galaxy for merely 2 centuries. You have claimed worlds without permission. You have traded without tribute. You have expanded without showing proper deference to those who ruled the stars before your ancestors crawled from their evolutionary mud. This insult ends today. The assembled court, hundreds of the most powerful beings from 63 subject species, erupted in synchronized displays of approval. Bioluminescent patterns flashed across scaled skin. Harmonic vocalizations filled the air. Ceremonial weapons were raised in salute. At the foot of the throne platform, completely alone among the crowd of alien dignitaries, sat a human. Declan Bryce, Special Envoy of the Terran Confederation, did not look up from the datapad in his hands. His fingers continued to move across the screen, making notes, occasionally swiping to a new document. His expression showed the mild concentration of someone reviewing a shopping list or answering routine correspondence. The Emperor's declaration of war, a pronouncement that would send fleets to burn human colonies, that would end billions of lives, that would reshape the political order of known space, received less attention from the human envoy than a message from home. The throne room's enthusiasm faltered. Confusion rippled through the assembled aliens. This was not how war declarations worked. The target species was supposed to show fear, or rage, or desperate offers of negotiation. They were not supposed to keep reading their mail. Human, the Emperor said, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that conveyed both authority and mounting irritation. You will acknowledge this declaration. You will understand that your species now faces annihilation. Respond appropriately. Declan held up one finger in a universal gesture for just a moment without lifting his eyes from the screen. He finished whatever he was reading, tapped a final note, and only then looked up at the towering Emperor with an expression of polite attention. I apologize, Your Eminence. You were saying something about war? The throne room went completely silent. Even the breathing of hundreds of beings seemed to stop. Chancellor Brevix, the Emperor's chief advisor, stepped forward with his crystalline carapace plates clicking in agitation. You dare show such disrespect? The Emperor has just declared that your entire species will be exterminated. This is the most serious pronouncement in galactic law. You should be on your knees begging for mercy. Should I? Declan asked mildly. He set his datapad aside and stood, brushing imaginary dust from his simple diplomatic suit. He was unremarkable by human standards, average height, brown hair going gray at the temples, perhaps 50 years old. Standing before an emperor who towered 3 meters tall and commanded an empire of 700 worlds, he should have looked insignificant. Instead, something about his calm made everyone in the room profoundly uncomfortable. Yes, Brevix insisted, though his voice carried less certainty than before. The Catharan Empire has destroyed 17 civilizations in the past millennium. We have fleets that number in the thousands. We have weapons that can sterilize planets. We have soldier species bred for combat prowess that would break your fragile human forms like twigs. You should be terrified. I see, Declan said. He walked forward until he stood at the base of the throne platform, looking up at the Emperor with an expression that could have been interpreted as respectful or could have been something else entirely. Your Eminence, before we proceed with this war, may I ask you a question? The Emperor's 4 eyes narrowed. You may ask. Though I am curious what question could possibly matter at this juncture. Why? Why what? Why are you declaring war on humanity? What is the actual reason? Not the ceremonial justification about tribute and deference. The real reason. The Emperor's mandibles clicked, a sign of irritation in Catharan physiology. You do not deserve to know the strategic considerations of. Because if I had to guess, Declan continued as if the Emperor had not spoken, I would say you are declaring war because our trade routes are cutting into your profit margins. Because human colonies are attracting immigrants from your subject species. Because 17 of your tributary worlds have formally requested to join the Terran Confederation instead. Because we represent an alternative model of civilization, and that threatens your entire power structure. The silence in the throne room had weight now. Several of the assembled dignitaries shifted uncomfortably. So this is not about honor or ancient laws, Declan said. This is about economics and control. Which is fine, most wars are. But you should at least be honest about it. How dare you? Chancellor Brevix thundered. The Emperor's reasons are beyond your comprehension. The might of the Catharan Empire is about to make a catastrophic error, Declan finished. But please, continue. Mobilize your fleets. Attack our colonies. See what happens. The threat should have been empty. One human, alone, facing an empire of 700 worlds. But the way he said it made something cold slither down the spines of those assembled. Emperor Zulvarin leaned forward on his throne. You are bluffing. Humanity has 12 colony worlds and perhaps 500 military vessels. We could crush you in a matter of months. Could you? Declan asked. Your Eminence, may I tell you a story? It is a short story, and relevant to our current situation. I will allow it. Though it will not change the outcome. Declan gestured to his datapad. 3 days ago, your Military Intelligence Division compiled a comprehensive assessment of human defensive capabilities. I know this because we intercepted the report. Would you like to know what it said? The Emperor's expression darkened. That report was classified at the highest level. How could you possibly? We have been in your networks for 2 years, Declan said calmly. Every military database. Every strategic planning session. Every classified communication. We know the exact location of every one of your fleets. We know your supply lines. We know which species are loyal to you and which are one bad harvest away from rebellion. We know everything. Impossible, Brevix said. Our cybersecurity is impenetrable. We employ the finest Kentari encryption specialists in the galaxy. Yes, I met some of them, Declan said. Nice people. They were very apologetic when we showed them how we had bypassed their systems. 3 of them actually asked to immigrate to human space. We are considering their applications. He looked around the throne room, making eye contact with various dignitaries. But that is not even the interesting part. Your military assessment concluded that while humans have inferior numbers, our ships are approximately 40% more effective in combat than equivalent Catharan vessels. Your analysts could not figure out why. Would you like to know? No one answered. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. It is because our crews want to be there, Declan said simply. Human military service is voluntary. Every person on every one of our ships chose to be there. They believe in what they are fighting for. They trust their commanders. They fight not because they are forced to or because it is their biological purpose, but because they have decided it matters. He gestured to the assembled dignitaries. How many of your soldier species are conscripts? How many are genetically engineered to be loyal? How many are serving because the alternative is punishment for their entire bloodline? How many of your ships have crews that would prefer to be anywhere else? Loyalty is loyalty, the Emperor said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. The method of achieving it is irrelevant. Is it? Then let me tell you what happened 2 days ago. One of your battle fleet commanders, Admiral Krethvolis, sent us a secret communication. He offered to defect and bring his entire fleet, 73 ships, if we would grant asylum to him and his crew. We declined, because we do not want to win through treachery. But the fact that he asked should tell you something about the loyalty you inspire. Chancellor Brevix made a strangled sound. That is a lie. Admiral Volus is one of our most decorated. Would you like me to play the recording? Declan pulled out his datapad. I have it here. Complete with authentication codes that prove it came from his personal secure channel. The Emperor raised one hand. That will not be necessary. Even if what you say is true, it does not change the fundamental calculus. We have overwhelming numerical advantage. Treachery from one admiral does not negate 700 worlds of resources. You are right, Declan agreed. So let me make this very simple. Your Eminence, you declared war to eliminate a threat to your power structure. You believe that if you destroy humanity, the tributary species will stop dreaming of alternatives. You will restore the absolute nature of your authority. Is that accurate? It is. Then I have a counter-proposal. Instead of war, let us have a test. A demonstration of which civilization is actually stronger. Not in ships or weapons, but in the thing that truly matters, the loyalty and capability of your people. What kind of test? The Emperor asked suspiciously. Pick your best world. Not your capital, but any highly developed colony that represents the peak of Ketheran civilization. Give me 6 months to visit, to observe, to learn about how you govern. At the end of that time, we will conduct a simple survey. We will ask the population one question: if given the choice, would you prefer to remain part of the Ketheran Empire or join the Terran Confederation? If the majority choose to stay with you, humanity will withdraw from 3 of our most prosperous trade routes and cede them to Ketheran control. But if the majority chooses us, you will grant that world independence. The throne room erupted in shocked murmurs. This was unprecedented. Insane. No empire would accept such terms. Why would I agree to this? The Emperor demanded. I could simply conquer you and take what I want. Because you are not certain you would win, Declan said quietly. Oh, you would probably defeat us eventually. Your numbers are overwhelming. But it would not be the quick conquest you are imagining. It would be bloody. It would be expensive. And in the process, how many of your other tributary worlds would see weakness? How many would use the opportunity to rebel? How many allies would you lose? He took a step closer to the throne. But if you accept my proposal and win, you prove to everyone that your system is superior. That given a choice, beings prefer to live under Ketheran rule. That humanity's alternative is not appealing. You would not just defeat us militarily, you would defeat us ideologically. You would prove we were wrong. And if you win, the Emperor asked. Then you lose 1 world. Out of 700. A tiny price for the proof that maybe, just maybe, you should reconsider how you govern the other 699. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Around the room, dignitaries whispered among themselves. The proposal was outrageous. Insulting. Unprecedented. It was also brilliant, because it put the Emperor in an impossible position. Refusing would look like fear. Accepting risked humiliation. But fighting would be costly. 6 months, the Emperor said finally. You will have access to Kelthar Prime, our second largest colony. Population of 3 billion. If you can convince the majority to choose your pathetic confederation over the empire that has protected and prospered them for 4 centuries, we will grant them independence. But when you fail, humanity will withdraw from those trade routes and pay tribute to the empire for the next century. Agreed, Declan said immediately. Shall we formalize the terms? 3 hours later, after the treaty was signed and witnessed, Declan returned to his shuttle. His assistant, a young human woman named Petra Lindholm, was waiting with obvious anxiety. Envoy Rice, what have you done? 6 months to convince an entire world to abandon the most powerful empire in the galaxy? That is impossible. Probably, Declan agreed, settling into his seat. But it was better than the alternative. Which was? War. Which we would have won, but at terrible cost. This way, maybe we can prove a point without anyone dying. How can you be sure we would have won? Declan pulled up a file on his datapad and handed it to her. Read this. It is the actual military assessment our intelligence division compiled. Not the one I told the Emperor about, the real one. Petra read through the document, her eyes widening. This says we would lose. That in a direct war, the Ketheran Empire would destroy us within a year. You lied to the Emperor about our military capabilities? I simplified, Declan said. The report does say we would lose militarily. But it also says that the economic and political costs to the Empire would be catastrophic. They would win, but they would be so weakened that a dozen other tributary species would immediately rebel. The Empire would collapse within a decade. So instead of a war that destroys everyone, you arranged a competition? Exactly. And Petra, I did not lie about everything. We really have been in their networks for 2 years. Admiral Volus really did offer to defect. And our assessment of crew morale really does give us a 40% advantage in combat effectiveness. I just omitted the part about how that still would not be enough. What if we lose the test? What if the people of Kelthar Prime choose to stay with the Empire? Declan smiled. Then we will have learned something important. Maybe we are wrong about the appeal of freedom and choice. Maybe most beings prefer the security of authoritarian rule. It would be valuable information. But you do not think that will happen? No. Because I know something about the people of Kelthar Prime that the Emperor does not. What? They are already unhappy. Not openly rebellious, not yet. But I have read their communications, their social discourse, their cultural products. They are tired. Tired of serving an emperor who treats them as resources rather than citizens. Tired of watching their children be conscripted for wars they do not believe in. Tired of prosperity that always seems to benefit the capital worlds more than the colonies. He looked out the shuttle window at the receding Ketharan capital ship. The Emperor thinks this is a test of ideology. But it is really a test of whether he has been paying attention to the people he rules. And based on the fact that he was surprised by Admiral Volus's defection, I am betting he has not. Over the next 6 months, Declan traveled across Kelthar Prime. He gave speeches. He attended town halls. He met with workers and artists and scientists and farmers. He did not promise them easy solutions or paint humanity as perfect. Instead, he did something simpler. He listened. Tell me about your life, he would say. What do you do? What do you dream about? If you could change one thing about your world, what would it be? And people talked. They told him about regulations that made no sense. About quotas that seemed designed to extract maximum resources rather than build sustainable communities. About talented children who could not pursue education because military service was mandatory. About environmental damage that officials ignored because fixing it would reduce short-term productivity. They told him about feeling like they did not matter to the empire they served. What would change if you joined the Terran Confederation? A factory worker asked during one meeting. I cannot promise everything would be better, Declan said honestly. The Confederation has its own problems. But I can promise you would have a voice. You would elect representatives who could be fired if they failed you. You would have courts that could hold officials accountable. You would have the right to say no when asked to do things you believed were wrong. That sounds like chaos, an older Ketharan said. Sometimes it is, Declan agreed. Democracy is messy. Freedom is complicated. But the alternative is living at the mercy of whoever happens to be in power. And based on your own history, that has not always gone well. He pulled up statistics on his datapad. Your world has been part of the Empire for 4 centuries. In that time, your standard of living has increased by 23%. That sounds good until you realize that human colonies of similar age have seen increases of 200%. You are not failing, your system is just not optimized for your benefit. It is optimized for the benefit of the capital. The Emperor would say that serves the greater good of the Empire, a local official argued. Perhaps. But who decided the Empire's good is more important than your good? Who decided your children should fight in wars that primarily benefit core worlds? Who decided your resources should flow upward rather than being reinvested locally? The Emperor. The Senate. The ancient laws. Exactly. People you did not choose. People you cannot remove if they fail you. People who will never face consequences for bad decisions because they are insulated by distance and power. And in the Confederation, it is different? Our Secretary General was voted out of office last year, Declan said. She made decisions that the population did not support. We held an election. She lost. Now someone else is in charge. That is the difference. We can be wrong. But when we are, we can correct it. As the 6 months drew to a close, Declan felt cautiously optimistic. The conversations had been productive. People were engaged. The mood on Kelthar Prime was one of possibility rather than resignation. But then, 2 weeks before the survey, disaster struck. A Ketharan military fleet arrived in orbit and began landing troops. Not an invasion, technically they had the right to deploy forces within their own territory. But the message was clear: intimidation. General Thex Vorain, commander of the fleet, held a press conference that was broadcast across the planet. The Empire has watched with concern as this human has spread lies and sedition among our loyal citizens. We are here to restore order and remind the people of Kelthar Prime of their duty. Troops marched through major cities. Curfews were imposed. Several prominent activists who had been vocal about considering independence were arrested on vague charges of disturbing the peace. Petra found Declan in his temporary office, staring at reports of the crackdown. This is a disaster. They are going to intimidate the population into voting to stay. The test is rigged. Maybe, Declan said. Or maybe the Emperor just made his biggest mistake. How is this a mistake? They are showing force right before the vote. Exactly. They are showing what happens when you consider alternatives. They are proving my point better than I ever could. He activated his communication system and broadcast a message to the entire planet. People of Kelthar Prime, I know many of you are frightened right now. Troops have arrived. Activists have been arrested. You are being reminded of the consequences of disobedience. And I want to be very clear, I understand if you choose to vote to remain part of the Empire. No one will judge you for being afraid. Fear is a rational response to intimidation. He paused, then continued. But I want you to ask yourself something. Is this how a government treats citizens it respects? Is this how a ruler behaves when he is confident in his people's loyalty? Or is this the action of an empire that knows it is losing and can only hold on through fear? The Emperor claims to have your best interests at heart. Yet his response to the possibility that you might choose differently is to send soldiers. To arrest people for speaking freely. To remind you that you exist to serve him, not the other way around. The Terran Confederation is not perfect. We have problems and challenges. But one thing we do not do is send troops to intimidate people before elections. Because we believe that if we are doing a good job, the votes will reflect that. And if we are not, the voters have the right to tell us so. In 2 weeks, you will be asked to choose. Whatever you decide, I will respect. But make your choice based on the future you want, not the present you fear. Ask yourself, do you want to live in a system where disagreement brings soldiers, or one where it brings debate? Where questioning authority is a crime, or where it is a right? Where you exist to serve power, or where power exists to serve you? The speech spread across the planet within hours. In response, General Vorain ordered it banned and demanded Declan's immediate arrest for sedition. Declan surrendered peacefully to Ketharan military custody. They held him in a detention facility, comfortable but confined, while the planet watched and waited. The day before the vote, the Emperor himself arrived on Kelthar Prime. He gave his own speech, grand and filled with historical references to glory and tradition. He promised prosperity. He warned of the chaos that would come from abandoning the established order. It was an impressive performance by a ruler who had governed for 60 years. And then the vote happened. 73% of Kelthar Prime's population chose independence and membership in the Terran Confederation. The results were verified by neutral observers from multiple species. There was no question of fraud. The people had spoken. In the throne room where this had all begun, Emperor Zul'Varan sat in silence as Declan, released from custody immediately after the vote, stood before him once more. "You have won," the Emperor said, his voice carefully neutral. "Kelthur Prime will be granted independence. The treaty will be honored. Thank you, Your Eminence. I know this was not the outcome you hoped for. How did you do it?" "Even with the intimidation, perhaps especially with it, I did not expect such a decisive loss." "What did you offer them?" "I offered them nothing except the truth," Declan said. "That they deserved better than to be subjects. That their voices mattered. That they had the right to self-determination." "That is all?" "That is everything. Your Eminence, you asked me earlier why we did not fear your declaration of war. This is why. Because an empire built on fear and coercion can defeat enemies, but it cannot inspire loyalty. You can force compliance. You cannot force belief. Humanity won this test because you made a critical error. You assumed the people of Kelthur Prime were happy because they were obedient. But obedience and contentment are not the same thing. You never asked them what they wanted. You never gave them a choice. So when someone finally did, they took it." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "What happens now?" "You have proven your point. Will you come for my other worlds? Will you encourage rebellion throughout my empire?" "No," Declan said. "That was never the goal. Your Eminence, I did not do this to destroy the Ketharan Empire. I did it to save it." "Explain." "Your empire was always going to collapse eventually. Systems built on coercion have expiration dates. The question was whether it would collapse violently, destroying everything it had built, or whether it could evolve into something more sustainable." "You think I should surrender my authority? Transform the empire into some kind of democracy? I think you should ask your people what they want. Not through surveys designed to produce favorable results. Not through symbolic gestures. Really ask them. Give them the power to answer honestly without fear of consequences. You might be surprised by what they tell you. And if they tell me they want me gone? Then you step aside with dignity and let someone else lead. That is what leaders do in systems that actually work. They serve until their service is no longer wanted, and then they make room for the next generation." The Emperor stood, all four of his arms moving in a gesture that could have been resignation or could have been something more thoughtful. "I will consider your words. Though I make no promises. That is all I ask." As Declan turned to leave, the Emperor called out, "Human. One more question. When I declared war and you did not look up from your datapad, that was calculated, was it not? You were making a point." Declan smiled. "I was reading a message from my daughter. She had just been accepted to university. I was so proud I could not focus on anything else. Your war declaration could wait until I finished congratulating her." "You are saying your daughter's achievement was more important than my declaration of war?" "To me? Absolutely. Because that is the difference between us, Your Eminence. You see people as resources to be managed. I see them as individuals with their own hopes and dreams and worth. My daughter getting into her first choice school mattered more to me than your empire's posturing, because she matters. Not as a tool or a subject or a statistic. As a person." "That is a dangerous way to govern," the Emperor said. "Perhaps. But it is a wonderful way to live." 6 months later, the Ketharan Empire began a process of reform. The Emperor established a council drawn from representatives of tributary worlds. They had advisory power only, not true authority, but it was a start. 2 years after that, 3 more worlds voted to join the Terran Confederation. The Empire granted their independence without military intervention. 5 years after the confrontation in the throne room, Emperor Zul'Varan announced he would step down after grooming a successor chosen through a new electoral process. And 10 years later, Declan Vrice, now retired from diplomatic service, received a message from the former emperor. "You were right. The empire I built was unsustainable. Change was necessary. I am grateful you forced me to see it before collapse made the lesson fatal. My successor is young and believes in things I struggled to understand. She will do better than I did. Thank you for giving us the chance to evolve rather than implode. Declan read the message to his daughter, who was visiting with his granddaughter. You changed a civilization, Dad, she said proudly. I gave them information they already had, Declan corrected. They changed themselves. That is how this works. You cannot force people to be free. You can only show them that freedom is an option and let them choose. His granddaughter, barely able to walk, pulled herself up using his knee and looked at him with serious eyes. Grandpa, tell story. The one about the Emperor. The Emperor who declared war and I ignored him? Yes. That one. Declan smiled and picked up the little girl. Well, sweetheart, it all started because I got a very important message about your mother that I needed to read right away. And no emperor, no matter how powerful, could make me stop being proud of my daughter, not even for a second. Was the emperor mad? Very mad. But eventually he understood. Because being proud of your children is more important than empires and armies and declarations of war. That is the most important lesson I ever learned. Power does not matter. Titles do not matter. What matters is the people you love and the moments you share with them. He looked at his daughter. Your acceptance to university mattered more than that emperor's war. This moment, holding your daughter, matters more than any treaty I ever negotiated. That is what makes us human. We value the small personal things as much as the grand political ones. Maybe more. Is that why we won? His daughter asked. That is exactly why we won. Because an empire that treats people as tools will always lose to a civilization that treats them as treasures. Every single time. Outside the window, stars glittered in the darkness of space. Some of them orbited worlds in the old Catherine Empire, now transforming into something new. Some orbited human colonies, thriving and growing. Some orbited worlds that had not yet been reached by either civilization. And somewhere in that vast darkness, new conflicts were brewing. New emperors would rise who needed to learn the same lessons. New wars would be declared. But Declan Rice was retired now. He had done his part. He had shown that sometimes the most powerful response to a threat was to not even look up from what truly mattered. Let others handle the empires and the declarations. He had a granddaughter to spoil and a life to enjoy. That was victory enough. If you enjoyed the story, like the video and subscribe for more. Thank you.